So this first picture for the urinary system is pretty simple. It's showing us mostly the abdomen and pelvic region. So we could say the abdominal pelvic cavity, if you remember that from A&P1. And there's a lot of generalized structures here. So this is a great review as we're getting into the last week and a half of class, which is crazy. In that it shows us an inferior vena cava here, and it shows us an abdominal aorta there. And these branches are going to the kidneys, so they're the renal artery and vein. Do you guys remember what the name of this tube that comes out of the kidney and goes to the bladder is? Don't read it. Just kidding. It's the ureter. And there's one on this side too. Okay. And then here, since it's a female, rectum, uterus, bladder. And remember, the tube here where urine leaves the body is called the urethra. A little bit different than ureter, right? If we come up here, we see the kidneys and we can see the adrenal glands on the kidneys. I just like to remind everybody too that this right here, these are the hepatic veins. Remember, veins are going back up. So that's where the liver drains into the vena cava so that that cleaner blood can go back to the heart. Right here is where the esophagus would come through. And let's see. Oh yeah, these are your hip bones, your iliac crest. And over here on this side, this one right here, hilum, the renal hilum. Any indented organ, the indented part could be called a hilum. So they did that on the lung, but I didn't make a big deal out of it. We don't do the lymph node in a lab. It was in lecture, but it was on the lecture. It mentioned the lymph node they might call it a hilum on that. They might call it a hilum on the spleen. So that's just a word that may come up from time to time in your future education. Okay. I'm not going to mark this picture at all, but if you want it in your notes, because that's how you normally do lab, if you want to take a picture, you can. This picture, looks kind of familiar because we saw one like this that helped us to learn the pleura, but this is obviously through a different location. Right here, the way that we're looking at it, I know it shows you that there, but I want you to think of it this way. It's like a person's laying here with their feet there, and we cut them and we remove their hips and their feet. So their feet would be pointing up. So their nose would be pointing that way. And this is in the abdominal cavity, so as we look up there, that is the diaphragm. That big red thing that we're seeing is the diaphragm. That's why it's domed away from us. Okay? What I really want to focus on first is remind you this membrane that lines the whole abdominal cavity. We've seen it before. It is called the peritoneum. So I'm going to do a little highlighting on this one. And the reason I make a big deal out of that and point that out is because you can notice the kidneys are behind that membrane. So technically, even though the kidneys are in here somewhere, they're behind our guts and they're behind that membrane. So there is a fancy word that loves to show up on lecture. That means behind the peritoneum. Here's the word. Change the retroperitoneal. They say that the kidneys are located retroperitoneally, or behind the peritoneum. Now you can also see they're really kind of beside the spine. And right here, they did not do a good job of showing us this. These are where your low back muscles are, or your back muscles. Okay, back here. They just make it look like skin. That is not what that's supposed to be. Renal artery and vein, pretty simple. Over here, what I like to focus on is the connective tissues. Notice there's fat around the kidney protected. The kidneys are protected by fat. And the kidneys have their own little capsule, connective tissue capsule. It's part of the kidney. We will see this when we label a kidney in a minute. The other important thing, there is connective tissue called fascia all around the kidney that anchors it in place. And so that's all I'm going to mark for this one. If you want to have the picture, get it while I kind of talk, because then I'm going to go back to the other picture and just remind you of something. That fascia is very important. That connective tissue is important because it keeps the kidney at the appropriate height. You know, we would have a problem if our kidneys dropped. Because if your kidney dropped in the cavity, watch this, I'll go back to this for a sec. If this kidney dropped down to here, it would kink that tube. And if it bent that tube, it's possible that it would reduce flow. It's possible that it could kink it and restrict flow, and then you would have a big problem. So those connective tissues that help to hold the kidneys in their proper height and location, that is important. Even though there's specific names, it was no big deal. But it is important to know there's connective tissue there. Now, oh look here, there's the hilum, the indented part. Now we're going to look at a kidney and we're going to label a kidney. But I'm going to go, just so you know, this is where I'm going to go to the blank. And I'm going to mark it up a couple times for you and have you take a picture. So let's go to the blank PowerPoint. Mark this up. First thing I'll mention are things that are pretty obvious. Let me say it like that. There is our ureter. Where is it going to? Bladder. Very good. It's going down to the bladder. And what's the name of the fluid that's in there? Urine. Yeah, good. This blood's going in. What would A stand for? Artery. Good. And this is renal vein. So there's our renal artery and vein. Now I know you can see when those blood vessels go in the kidney, they branch. But in this picture, they've cut them. So we're not seeing them real well. So I have a picture later that I'll show you that has blood vessels. Now our point is not to memorize all the names of the blood vessels anymore. It's to help see where the blood goes. And I'll just tell you now, what's going to happen is the blood vessels are going to branch and they're going to go up here to the cortex. Or really, I should say out here, because the cortex is, watch this, I'm going to highlight it in yellow. All of this outer part here, all the way around, that's the cortex. What would that make the inner portion? Very good, the medulla. And within the medulla, there are very important structures here that at first glance look like little triangles. Take that one away and highlight this one. But because they're three-dimensional, they're not going to call them triangles. They're going to call them renal pyramids. And the pyramids are the major structures of the medulla. So I'm going to write medulla across here. So you can see cortex and medulla. And then I'm going to label the pyramid there. Now each pyramid opens up to a tube that you can see. Here's one, here's one, here's one. And those tubes drain, like they lead sometimes to bigger tubes and eventually to that area right there. They should have removed those blood vessels. It really frustrates me, this picture. They cut some of the vessels, but then they put them here, and it makes you think there's blood vessels in there. Those blood vessels, let me say it a different way. The ureter comes up. See how they cut the ureter? The ureter opens up here, but it stays a tube. But when it goes to the hilum here, they change its name and they call it the renal pelvis. There are no blood vessels in that. All of these blood vessels would be on the back side and the front side, on the outside of the ureter as it comes in. So they don't penetrate into this group of tubes, is what I'm saying. Okay? So those blood vessels are outside of those tubes. These tubes are all these little tubes, they're all about collecting urine. So let me use the urine color, yellow. Here's what's going to happen. Urine's going to come this way. And then it's going to go here. And then it's going to go there. That's the path of urine. I'll explain it again. We'll get more technical than that. But this one here, urine would come down through that pyramid, come out through here, and work its way over there, and then go down the ureter. It's good to see you. This one, y'all remember what this was called? The renal, I said it real fast. I think. Maybe I didn't say it. It's called the renal pelvis, where the ureter opens up to a bigger space in the kidney. That space in the kidney that collects urine is called the renal pelvis. The renal pelvis. And that renal pelvis, the little tubes that feed the renal pelvis, each one is called a calyx. So here, where I'm putting the black, calyx, calyx, calyx. Now, I will tell you the truth. The little ones are called minor calyces, and the larger ones are called major. It's really not a big deal for us in lab. I wouldn't have had you label the difference between the two typically, but I'll say it so you've heard it just in case. I don't recall anybody getting a question about this on the test, on the lecture test, but watch this. Each pyramid has its own little tube like this. So that would be called minor because it goes to one pyramid. But if you look right across here, just past the renal pelvis, that branch, that tube, actually leads to 1, 2, 3. So they would call it major. So the smallest branches are called minor, and bigger branches are called major. And then all those majors lead to the renal pelvis. And so the calyces and the renal pelvis and the ureter. The calyces, the renal pelvis, and the ureter, they carry the urine out of the kidney. The calyces, the renal pelvis, and the ureter, they carry that urine out of the kidney. Here is, they just love everything they put renal on, so I'm going to start putting the R. Here's the renal capsule that we saw from the other picture. It is a connective tissue capsule, and it goes all the way around the kidney. It's like the outer border of the kidney. Right here, I think you can see that between the pyramids, there's this area of tissue that doesn't look like the pyramid. The pyramids have stripes, but this just looks like the cortex because it is the cortex. So that little part of the cortex between the pyramids, they call a renal column. A renal column. So there's a renal column. Look, I'm going to go ahead and put another one. Bless you. Here's another one right here.
Thank you.
So always between the pyramids, they call that empty space or blank space that it looks like to us. They call it, between the pyramids, they call it a renal column. That's actually where the blood vessels go. So in our next picture, we'll see that. There's only one more structure. I've never marked it up like this where I get to label everything. There's only one more structure I need to label on this picture. And it's called a renal papilla. Remember, papillary, like a papillary muscle, means a projection. Sticks out. So watch here. I think I'll pick this one right here and I'll erase the little dots for calyces so you guys can see. See how each pyramid pushes into the calyx? Every single one of them, if we looked at them, they have a tip, like an apex, that goes into the calyx. That little tip, I'm going to use a different color so maybe it'll stand out. Both of these, there's the little tip, there's the little tip. Renal papilla. The renal papilla. The little tips that I drew in white there. Papilla can be spelled with an A or an AE, whether it's singular or plural. I don't care. You can do it either way. I'm okay with that. So these are the major anatomical structures of a kidney. I would like you to get the picture because then if I let you get the picture, because I marked this one up so much, I'll let you get a blank picture right after it. So once you guys, if you all get the picture, let me just delete all the words and show you the blank and let you get it right behind it. Okay? Everybody got it now? So let's take the words off and let's get the blank so then you can see those structures that may have been covered up. For example, now I think you see the calyces much better, right? It's a tube right here. Let me get some. So this tube is a calyx. This tube is a calyx. This tube is a calyx. Each of those pyramids has a tip like that, like that. That's a papilla. I like the way they've drawn this. You can see stripes running through the pyramid. Each of these pyramids, you can see those stripes. When we zoom up and do microscopic anatomy, I'll show you what those were, okay? And we will see them shortly. Here's a renal column. Here's a renal column. All of these parts between the pyramids are called renal columns. And so this area here, that's the medulla, basically right there. It's this part of the kidney where those pyramids are. What's it called outside of it? Cortex. Just so you know. The cortex is where we make urine. Okay. And the structures out there that make the urine are going to be called nephrons. The structures in the cortex where we make the urine are going to be called nephrons. So there's a very important concept here with the kidney. We know that the kidneys, we know they're filtering our blood. We've heard that before. They filter the blood and they pull the waste product out, and that waste product eventually becomes urine. But the concept, the way I like to say this is, here's what this means. Blood goes into the kidney, and some of it gets turned into the waste, but most of it stays blood every time it circulates through. So you have blood moving in through the renal arteries. The blood that comes out through the renal veins. And additionally, we have an extra fluid. The urine comes out, the waste product comes out. So it's kind of interesting because we have one fluid going in, but we have two fluids coming out, both blood and urine. So that's a really important concept for the kidney. The nephron, oops, that white pen didn't work so good. The nephron is in the cortex mostly, where we make urine, and it is tiny, it is microscopic. You don't see it in this picture, okay? The next few, in a little bit, next few pictures after we do the blood vessels are going to be all about the nephron. We're going to spend a good amount of time learning the nephron. Another thing I like to mention, just remind you, average person has approximately 5 liters of blood. Not exactly, but close to it. And on an average day, we make about 2 liters. I know the fancy number I might give next time will be 1.5, but 2 is fine for this. Okay. So I want your brain to start thinking, oh yeah, we have about 5 liters of blood, and during the course of a day, from that blood, we're going to filter out about 2 liters of urine. Now, that's going to vary, right? If you drink a ton of extra water, you're going to urinate more. If it's super hot out and you're working out, you're going to sweat more. So things change. But this is a nice little average to think of. So I highly recommend you get this picture to give you the big concept of what the kidneys do. Filter the blood and remove that waste, and we will eventually call that waste urine. Okay, let's go to the blood vessel picture. And I use this blood vessel picture that we'll see next. It's back on, my apologies for the way we bounce back and forth. Oh, and I guess before I go there, I wanted to show you the real one. Here's a real kidney that's been dissected. Notice, here's the pyramids in the medulla. Okay, here's some other pyramids down here. These didn't stain so well. There we're seeing some here that look better, just the angle. To me, this does a good job of showing the renal pelvis because you can actually see that it's an opening that came from a tube. And look, the little calyces that go down to each pyramid. And look, there's even a papilla right there pushing into that calyx. So that's just real. And also it shows us you can see like some stripes in those pyramids, which is how they drooped. The blood flow, I do not need you to know all of these vessel names. I'm gonna say a couple of them so you've seen them, but any one that I need you to really know, I would write down. Okay. So renal artery comes in here, and remember it's outside the renal pelvis, and it finds its way to a column, and it goes up a column, and it turns the corner around a pyramid, and then there's some branches that go out and radiate through the cortex. Now that's pretty simple until every time it branches, you have to give it a name. Okay. For us, to me, most of these names, get the names perfect isn't the big deal. The big deal is that you know the renal arteries go in and they branch. And a branch goes through a column, and then they curve over every single pyramid, and then they radiate out through the cortex. And notice, every time as they're moving outward, they're getting smaller and smaller and smaller. Eventually, if we're going to filter the blood, if we're going to move stuff out of the blood, we have to get to capillaries. So there's, after those little branches out here, there's going to be capillaries. They have shown none of that. So we're going to get even smaller than this picture. So you'll notice one thing I said a couple times, as the blood vessels go out through the cortex here, they call them cortical radiate. So there's a cortical radiate artery and a cortical radiate vein. I cannot imagine that there's a test question about that because it's not labeling, right? This isn't, you're not going to have the lab test. But why I show you that, and why I also show you this, the little one that arcs over, is because our next picture is going to be labeling a nephron. And the nephrons are out here with these vessels. The nephrons are primarily in the cortex. And so let me, if you want that picture, here's what I'll write on it. And where the cortex is, that's where the nephrons are. Okay? The nephrons are in the cortex. And that is what we will see next. It's the nephrons in the cortex. I prefer, when we're learning this, to label the drawing for you instead of going from the labeled version. Because the more times you see it marked up, I think it helps you learn it. I'm going to get this just a little bigger, as big as I can get it. There we go. And then I'm going to draw on here. First, use the highlighter like this. I'm going to go like this. See how I curved that in? Here's why. Stripes. What do you think I'm trying to show you there? Very good. That is a pyramid. And yes, it's called renal. And that means that is the medulla. Up here would be the cortex. And so you can see this part of the nephron is in the cortex, and a little bit of it comes down into the pyramid. So these blood vessels, these were the ones that you saw curving over the pyramid. So these are the arcuates. You won't have to label. And here's the one that radiates out. But this right here is where we're going to start the naming. That little blood vessel right there, I want you to see how it goes into something. Okay? And what it goes into, this right here, that is a full network of these things. You guys tell me what I mean when I draw one of those. Very good. That's a capillary. So that's a whole network of capillaries right there. The blood vessel that sends blood into it has a name that means going in. When you were in A&P1 and you studied the nervous system, sensory information in was also called afferent, or you might have said afferent. I say afferent so you cannot miss that it starts with the A. That's why I pronounce it like that. So this little red vessel right there is called the afferent arteriole. Now let me remind you from your lectures, an arteriole is a little smaller than an artery, but it's not quite a capillary. Okay, those were the blood vessels in case you missed this on the lecture test. Well, if you haven't taken it, maybe you'll get this one. Oh, somebody's at the front door. And arterioles are the blood vessels where there's the greatest pressure drop in any part of the body. They have the greatest cross-sectional area, and that's where there's the greatest pressure drop. And actually, it's the arterioles that lose the pulse. So all arteries have a pulse, but by the time it gets to the arterioles, it's just branched too far that the blood just now flows smooth. It no longer pulses. All right, so that's the afferent arteriole. What kind of blood vessels does it lead into? Where I drew the picture. Capillaries. And boy, they give those capillaries a name. That capillary network is one of the most important parts of the kidneys. It is called the glomerulus. The glomerulus. Remember zona glomerulus? Ah, that's why they named it that. From the adrenal cortex, because it regulates the kidney, and one of the most important structures in the kidney is the glomerulus. The glomerulus is a network of what? Very good, capillaries. And just, I'm going to write the word nephron over here. Wow. Average person has 1.25 million of these in each kidney. So that's a lot. They're tiny. We know how tiny capillaries are. They're invisible to the naked eye, so these nephrons are pretty tiny too. Most of the tubes are so small you wouldn't even tell they're tubes if you saw a kidney cut. Some of them are bigger. The big ones that make these stripes right here is this one, the last one. And so this tells you we're separating out one nephron, but there's going to be tons of them running in the same space. And this biggest tube is called a collecting duct. And it's when the fluid, the filtered fluid, gets to the collecting duct is when they can finally call it urine. Before that, they can't call it urine. Or they shouldn't call it urine because it's not urine yet. It's almost urine, but not quite. So let me kind of go through this again because we still have a lot of holes in it. But remember, blood comes into the kidney through the renal artery and it branches through the kidney. It moves all the way through the kidney to get to the cortex. So it goes to the outer regions before we have these. And then when we get in the outer regions, now is where we can filter the blood. And we filter it through this tube network called a nephron. And there's tons of those in each kidney. Well, so we have to have a blood vessel that leads into it. That's the afferent arteriole. What it leads into is a network of capillaries called the glomerulus. And we know what capillaries allow. They allow exchange. These capillaries don't. They don't take anything in. They only push it out. That is their job. So what we'll get, I'll put some dots around here. And usually I do little arrows like that. Because fluid and stuff leaves the capillary. And can you tell there's like a membrane around those capillaries? That big membrane there holding them? This membrane here, right here, has a name, of course. Everything has a name. It's called Bowman's capsule. And it is made to trap that fluid. Do you see where the arrow points out of the Bowman's capsule? That's where the fluid has to go. So here's where the fluid goes. Goes that way, snakes around, and eventually goes down. And so that tube that I just highlighted in black, it has a name. And I guess I didn't leave I shouldn't have put black there. I should have just left that yellow. so I'm going to do that right now. Continue that little yellow just right there. And just for consistency's sake, so you'll know that blue arrow is pointing at these. So that tube that I'm pointing at, that little blue one that comes out of the Bowman's capsule, it's the first tube. So they will call it proximal. Proximal means the initial portion, the beginning portion. It is curved. A word that means curved is convoluted. And it's a tiny tube, so they call it a tubule. Proximal convoluted tubule. And that proximal convoluted tubule, when it straightens out and it makes this loop, it changes its name. So right here, when it does that, now they're going to call it the loop of Henle. H-E-N-L-E. H-E-N-L-E. And don't worry, it's always confusing. And that's why I mark up like 5 different nephrons for you. Henle. H-E-N-L-E. By the time that we get done with this, the parts of the nephron there are going to be real simple for you. But when we first do it, it's crazy. And everybody's brain cramps. And then we get to the end of the night and you're like, oh yeah, that's the proximal convoluted tubule. Oh yeah, that's the loop of Henle. Okay, after the loop of Henle, it curves up again. Right there. That's no longer the first segment, that's the last. So they call that distal. Convoluted. What's the last word going to be? Tubule. Yeah, the distal convoluted tubule. And then those distal tubules, just like this one did, it plugs into a collecting duct. So see what this is? This is another distal convoluted tubule from another nephron. And so is that, and that, and that, and that. Those collecting ducts are so big, lots of nephrons dump into the same collecting duct. That's why I mentioned earlier, when we saw a pyramid and we saw the stripes, those stripes are those collecting ducts. They are much bigger. Now, this is not drawn to scale. That collecting duct is a lot bigger than the way the loop of Henle and the other tubes look. It's just going to be bigger. Okay. So that's our first markup of the nephron. Oh, I left one thing out. If this one is the afferent arteriole, there's capillaries. The blood's not done. It comes out here, right here. So we have to name that one. And the opposite of afferent, the word that means going out, yes, efferent. Efferent arteriole. And so that's it. You got it. That is our complete markup of a nephron. Now, once again, just like a lot of pictures, you know, you mark it up and everything's all in the way. So I'm going to go ahead and clear it and let you get the blank picture on your phone just in case you want to have it right there after, since it was so marked up. So now you have the blank picture to look at. I know you also have your other pictures. You certainly don't have to snag that if you don't want it. I can't believe we're cruising. This is the next picture I like to mark up. This is in that blue PowerPoint called the nephron structure and function, or structure determines function. Okay. It has all the same parts. They just look a little different. What do you think this tube is right here? Perfect. So watch what I'm going to do. Instead of writing it out, I'm going to abbreviate it. AA for afferent arterial. What did we call this capillary bed here? What was its name? Glomerulus. So I'm going to put a big old G in there. What was this tube right here coming out of the glomerulus? So the proximal does come out, but the proximal is the tube. So the blood vessel, so let me rephrase this. The blood vessel coming out here is the efferent arterial. What you didn't see in the other picture, and this is really important, this efferent arterial ends up surrounding all the rest of the nephron. Except it doesn't stay the efferent arterial. So this picture is just kind of a baby picture. It becomes the next set of capillaries. So these tubes here, all of these tubes here, all around there, they are they're capillaries that surround the tubes, so they call them peritubular capillaries. The other picture didn't show that, so that was one of the reasons I need another picture, different pictures to show that. So notice how I started with this one. This time I did all the blood vessels first. Okay, instead of going into the nephron itself, I did the blood vessels associated with the nephron. Now we can come back and say, what is this membrane that surrounds the glomerulus? Bowman's capsule. Now you don't know what kind of tissue it is yet. It is not a normal capsule. Almost every time we've had a capsule, it's been something. This is totally different. I'll tell you later. I'm not ready to tell you yet. Where it leaves the Bowman's capsule right here, that becomes the first part. What's the first part called? Proximal convoluted tiny tube, tubule. Proximal convoluted tubule. What are we going to call this whole thing here? Loop of Henle. Yeah. The loop of Henle. Notice it has two sides. C is that one side, the fluid's going down, and the other side, it has to go up. Now, it does not just in the blood vessels, but in the loop of Henle also. Okay? It'll go down on one side and up on the other. And then where the loop of Henle curves back here, who's going to be brave and tell me what that is? There we go. Distal convoluted tubule. And we know many distal convoluted tubules from other nephrons will also attach to this. What is this bigger tube? Because it collects all the fluid misspelled it. Remember, it's over here where we finally get to call it urine. Well, really, we could call it urine as soon as it hits it. It doesn't have to get to the end. But in the collecting duct, it becomes urine. Remember, the number we want to have is about 2 liters per day for urine. About 2 liters. How much blood?
5.
About 5 liters. Good. And so that's your next markup. We're going to stay in the same PowerPoint and go a few slides down until you get a funny looking one that looks like that. And notice this one, they were nice to us and they labeled the capillaries. So all of these are peritubular capillaries. The glomerulus is what? A network of capillaries. So it's the one right here, right there. So you know what I'm going to ask? What's that? And what's that? Efferent. So right there, it's efferent. Now, once it starts branching here, what are they? No.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Yeah, I was trying to point. So they're blood vessels, right? So the red ones, this is what I'm doing. So I'm doing all the red ones first. Yeah, I know. The purple's there. So this red one that goes to all of these red ones. And the red ones over there. All the red ones are the peritubulars. And so I'm going to go ahead and put a G right here. But yeah, what we want to do is follow the nephron. So what are we going to call the nephron right there? The tube, sorry. Proximal convoluted tubule. Okay, once it gets here, what are we going to call it here? So I'm going to write LOH. And look at this, then it gets crazy. What? Goes over here, goes through there, curves back around, and comes right here. What are we going to call all that? Distal convoluted tubule. And so what is this thing? And now we can call the fluid urine. And how much do we make? There you go. Yeah, 1.5, 1.75, 2.02. Yeah, so depends on the day, depends on who you are. Depends on many things. No. And so there's another nephron. That's nephron number 3. See how you're already getting used to the names? I mean, you've heard the names, you're hearing the names, you're getting used to hearing the names. How do you spell Henle? Henle. Yeah, weird word. Henle. It was a name, by the way. Named after Henle, because that's how they do things. Say again?
Same as the Volkman?
Oh, like Volkmann's canals?
No, the Volkman's capsule.
Oh, yeah, Bowman's. Yeah. Bowman's capsule was named after Bowman. Mhm.
That's a lot.
Yeah. This is a lot. You ever been called a lot? No, don't answer that. All right. I'm just going to zoom this up. We're not going to rely on them. We're going to rely on us to name these parts. We're going to color code them. So, see if I can get this a little bigger. There we go. So we're only going to do this nephron right here. Oh, sorry, it was on the labeled. This one was on the labeled. And really, I'm going to want you to take a picture and follow me up here with, let's pick, you got to pick good colors. So I'm going to use this bright green first. And can y'all find the glomerulus? Just yes or no? Yeah? How many glomeruluses do you see on the screen? Two, correct. If you see two, you're a winner. Okay. What's the name of the blood vessel that goes into it called? Afferent arteriole. So look, just so happens, there it is, and we can see it labeled. Okay. So here's our glomerulus. What's this little membrane around it right here called? Bowman's capsule. So what I'm going to do is trace the proximal tubule in green. Oh yeah, when I said proximal tubule, what word did I leave out? Convoluted. You know why I did that? Because they do that. Because in science, that's what they do. Sometimes they call it the proximal convoluted tubule, and other times they just drop the twisted part. They just say proximal tubule. Okay, so there's the proximal convoluted tubule. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write it in fat P, C, T, and then I'm going to take my little black pen, go a little smaller, and go P, C, T. So there's our PCT. What color do you want the loop of Henle in? Pink one, because I heard it next. All right, so here is the loop of Henle. That's all I got for pink. Okay, so let's go L-O-H, loop of Henle. All right, who wants the distal color? Pick it. We only got these. Yeah, it's going to show up best, so we'll do blue. Ooh, trying to lose us. Where do we go? Oh, that's so boring. It just went right behind it. And then it kind of gave up in there. So, I wonder if it'll work. So I did this on purpose because I wanted you to see that they're not as simple as what we saw. They're not. They can twist a bunch. They're a lot longer than what we saw as well. What would this be? Yeah. And look how it's nice. Both of these plug into the collecting duct in different places, and look at all the other distal tubules for other nephrons that could plug right into. It's not until we get there that we can call it urine. So you know I'm getting ready to tell you what it's called in the whole rest of the nephron, because it's not blood and it's not urine, it's something else. Right, snag that picture. See See, repetition really does help. And we marked it up one way, then we used abbreviations, and then we color coded. So when you do things different, that helps to build your brain power and your understanding too, your memory. Plus, it's just fun. Haha, I think it's fun. Look at this. That loop of Henley is so long, I have to zoom out. Look, it's still going. Holy moly. Look at that loop of Henley. What? Are you kidding me? Look how tiny we have to get that thing to be able to see the whole loop of Henley. So here's what I want you to know. And now I'm just going to go back to the normal kind of PowerPoint size here and mark this up. When the nephron is really low, see how this is really close? And it has a really long, really crazy long loop of Henley. They give the capillaries here a special name. They call them vasa recta because they kind of look rectangular. Okay, vasa recta. I know they've labeled it for you, but I wanted to write it too. That's around those really long loops of Henley. So this one's really short. It's not going to have that. Okay. I don't like the way they're showing it. It would still have capillaries around it. It has two or nothing can happen. So it's not the greatest drawing, but that's okay. Notice they didn't put capillaries here either. Now, these nephrons, the long ones and the short ones, or the ones that are in the cortex mostly versus dipped down, they have different names. 85% approximately of your nephrons are cortical. That means they're like this one. That they're mostly in the cortex, and their loop of Henley might just barely go into the medulla. So how many percent are these? 15%. And of this 15%, because the name is more complex, I'm going to write it for you. Juxta. Juxta. Oh, I'm doing something else. I hope I didn't do that in the other class. If I did, nobody corrected me. No, I didn't. They're called juxtamedullary nephrons. Juxta means next to. Okay? Like there's a word called juxtaposed, next to, or across from. That means that these nephrons, they're located right on the border. They're really close to the medulla. Remember how the medulla is actually here? And the cortex is up there. I'm going to take this off the screen because it kind of ruins everything. Yeah. So juxtamedullary have the long blood vessels and the long loop of Henley that goes down into the medulla. So it's called juxtamedullary. These nephrons play a very important role in concentrating or diluting your urine. They play a major role in changing the water content of your urine. Okay, that's why they're there. If we need more water in the blood, they can put it there. If we don't, they can get it out of the body. And so that's it for this little picture, showing the kind of two kinds of nephrons. So at this point, it's kind of fun to go back to the first picture we did of the nephron. Oh. And hopefully you'll see how easy this is. Let's see if we can do it. And I'm going to be crazy and go out of order. What's this called? All right. What letter should I put here?
G.
For?
Glomerulus.
Glomerulus. Okay. This membrane here. Very good. This tube here.
Proximal convoluted tubule.
Good. This one.
Collecting duct.
And what does that leave here?
Distal.
Aha, look at that. So what's that one? And this one? That's it. That's all the part. There's not that many parts. This is one of those crazy things that when you start it, it feels complicated. It's got these words that we've never heard and all these tubes. They're just saying, oh, in order, the tubes have names. Okay. So let me ask you again, how much blood you have?
5 liters.
How much urine you make?
2 liters.
So here's the next part. We know that from what I've been saying, that over here, the fluid's not called urine. It's not blood. It's been filtered at the glomerulus. See, that's what happens at the glomerulus. We filter the blood. That's pretty cool because it's capillaries. They let it seep out, and it gets trapped by the Bowman's capsule. That fluid that comes out, therefore, is filtered. Where was it filtered? So look at the name they give it. This is crazy. So watch, they call it filtrate. They call it glomerular filtrate because it was filtered out of the glomerulus. So what do they call the fluid in the loop of Henle? Glomerular filtrate. And what do they call the fluid over here in the distal tubule? Glomerular filtrate. What do they call it when it gets to the collecting duct? Now it's urine. Yep. Oh, and I might as well. Anybody remember? I haven't said it again since the first slide. How many nephrons per kidney? Yeah, 1.25 million. Wow. 1.25 million. That's pretty crazy. You know what? I think that's bad location. So I'm just going to do this. Like that. That's better. So it is ready for your picture. Now, if you really want to know the nephron, you'll practice drawing it. Because if you can draw it, boy, then you really know it. So here's the next one I want to do with you. In this picture, we're going to take this picture and we're going to talk about how urine is formed. So the formation of urine or urine formation. Now, what is this picture? Well, I bet you can tell me what this is. That's a glomerulus. So I bet you know what this one is. Because look, here's the big one. So that's afferent. So what's this have to be? And then these that come out, those are your peritubular capillaries. So what in the world? Well, let me do this. So what's this?
The bone.
Very good. That's our BC. So what's this? Proximal, Lupa Henley, and distal. They're taking it and putting it all together. They're just saying, this is the tubule. This is the tubules. We're not going to worry about their names. So what they're trying to show you is this, first off. And I think I want to see if it'll work. Number one. Filtration happens only there. That is the only place we do a technical process called filtration. It is where the fluid seeps out of the capillaries. Let's see how, oh no, we'll use, because it's going to be urine. So as it comes out, put it there, right? And it's coming out. And it's getting trapped by Bowman's capsule, and then it gets pushed here. So at the glomerulus, we filter, so they call it glomerular filtrate. Now, it's filtration because the blood that's in the glomerulus is under pressure. The glomerulus actually has little holes in it, and it pushes the fluid out. It's pressure pushing out, and that's the technical definition of filtration. True filtration, like when you make coffee with coffee filter, the pressure behind it pushes stuff across a membrane and it separates. So that's this, it's filtration. It is the first step in urine formation. Notice they used a red dot there, so I used red. See the blue dot? I'm going to use blue. Green dot, I'm going to use green. There's 3 steps in urine formation. Or technically, we could say 3 processes. What's the process that takes place between glomerulus and Bowman's capsule called? Filtration. And what did we call the fluid that produces? So we change the ending. Instead of glomerulus, we say glomerular. Glomerular filtrate. And so now that filtrate's in the tube, and we have way too much of it. So I'll tell you, what it has to do is right away, we have to start putting it back into the blood. Well, I don't know if y'all remember, but I sure do. When we studied the endocrine system, we had a fancy word that always meant back into the blood. And so whenever fluid, salt, sugar, whatever, when it leaves the tube, proximal, Lupa Henley, distal, even collecting duct, and it goes back into the blood, we call it reabsorption. You may remember there's some chemicals that we learned, hormones, that cause the reabsorption of salt. And water follows, and it raises blood volume and blood pressure. Don't worry about it, okay? But the point is, We know reabsorption means it moves into the blood. Okay? Well, the crazy thing about this is we're going to pull stuff into the blood that maybe is still a waste product that we maybe don't need. So we have to fine tune it and we have to get rid of it. And so then we're going to put it back to tubules. That's the opposite, back to the tubules. And anytime it goes back into the tubules, that fancy name for that process is called secretion. That is known as secretion. Now the lecture video will take you further into these three processes. What I wanted to help you understand is that there's three processes of urine formation. Filtration happens only in one location. Where is that? Between the glomerulus and Bowman's. Reabsorption and secretion both take place through the rest of the nephron. Okay? That's why that's the rest of the nephron. And by the way, only at the end do we get to call it urine. And remind me how much urine you make? About 2 liters. Remind me how much blood we have. So here's the question. In a day, in an average normal human day, how much glomerular filtrate do you make? I'm going to go get my water while you think about it. I'll be right back.
Or what if it's 1 liter and then we absorb 1 liter? Yeah, but I put it on this morning. I think it's running out.
We could. Not even the patches are like.
I know. We're doomed.
Retroperitoneal. I think it's the location. It's in the retroperitoneal.
I'll just watch it back.
Okay, so that one that you said,
Ooh, did you find the answer?
you said,
Yeah.
I said 3. Ishan said 5.
So it's insane. You ready for this?
Mm-hmm.
So in a day, how many kidneys do you have?
2.
Most people 2. How many nephrons per kidney?
1.25 million.
Yeah, a lot, 1.25 million. So the idea is between both kidneys and all those nephrons. Every minute, the blood moves, circulates through your body. So in this minute, it's producing a few droplets. In the next minute, a few droplets. In the next minute, a few droplets, and it never stops the whole day. Whatever fluid we make, a lot of it goes right back into the blood. And what remains could eventually be urine. So we know at the end of the day, we're only going to have 2 liters of urine that we made. But at the end of the day, did your blood go down to 3 liters? No, because all day long you're filtering it out, but then that makes you thirsty, so you replace it. So you keep your 5 liters of blood, little bits come out, you make 2 liters of urine. You ready to be crazified here? 180 liters.
I really guess.
180 liters
That is a lot.
of what? Yeah, GF, glomerular filtrate. That's a tough one. Glomerular filtrate. Wow. They say the average person makes 180 liters of that a day. Now, we never have, at one time, we don't have that 180 liters. It's produced droplet by droplet all day long, and most of it goes right back into the blood. So it didn't stay GF for very long, but that's how hard the kidneys are working. I want you to know, your kidneys are working so hard that they produce about 45 gallons. That's what that is, 45 gallons, 180 liters of fluid a day. That's a lot. That's almost a big oil barrel. That's what your kidneys do every single day that they're working. But at the end of the day, how much urine do you make?
2.
So that means how much of this has to go right back into the blood? Every day, 178 liters gets reabsorbed right back into the blood. 178 liters of that GF gets reabsorbed right back into the blood. Why am I making a big deal out of it? Because both of these questions are in the test pool. Okay? There is, and I don't know if they're both in the practice quizzes or not, but there is a question that shows up on the test that says, how much glomerular filtrate does a person make in a day? Tell me the answer. 180 liters. There is another question that asks, how much glomerular filtrate is reabsorbed? 178. Reabsorbed always means by the blood. Okay? I'm thinking that there's a Quizlet that has the wrong answer, because a lot of people in my online class pick 180 for reabsorbed. Okay? And I'm thinking they do that because somebody made a class Quizlet at some time and put 180 liters is reabsorbed, and everybody uses the Quizlet that's wrong or something. So just keep that in mind, okay? That the question could be either way. How much GF is produced? 180. How much is reabsorbed? 178. There you go. There you go. And that's just to really show us how hard the kidneys work. It's crazy how hard they work. So that's our picture. Cool. Sure. So I'm gonna go to the labeled version of this same picture. Probably it's in the blue. Let me find first. I think it's in here. I already have that. No, I am gonna go there to get all those words on the screen. I want the words. There, that's the one I want. So it's the labeled version of this. So it was in the labeled PowerPoint. because it just has a little extra stuff on it. But I'm not going to add anything new at all. I'm just going to show you what you already know. Okay. Well, you're going to tell me actually. That's what I'm looking for. Watch this. Name that process. Very good. That's reabsorption. That's all number 2. Okay. And how much is reabsorbed? And what's it reabsorbed by? By the blood. Peritubular capillaries, to be specific, the capillaries, but it's by the blood. Remember, reabsorbed means into the blood. This process here is just called secretion. By the way, you're going to learn in lecture, very little is secreted. It's medications and hydrogen ions and some other ions. Not much stuff is secreted. It's really, I like to say secretion is fine-tuning the urine. Okay. So imagine this. Oh, this is what process happens here. Filtration, and look, this is crazy. It's only one way. Those are some of the only capillaries in the body that aren't both ways. They just let stuff out. There's a serious problem if stuff starts going back in. It's not going to happen. Okay? It goes out. And what's our nephron number? Per kidney. Okay, if you want it, snag it. Just another of the same, but it's a little cleaner version. What? This is crazy. Oh, it's already 7:30. It feels so fast. Not to y'all, I'm sure. Okay. Y'all got that? So now we can leave all this crazy nephron and go back to big organs. We'll go back to the bladder. So we're going to stay on this labeled version. Yeah, certainly I got that picture, didn't I? Yes, I did. And now, so this little bladder, we're just gonna mostly mark up like this. Remember when we did reproductive, we saw the urogenital diaphragm? It's the muscles and connective tissue, commonly referred to as the pelvic floor, right? The urethra, as we know, is that tube that carries urine out of the bladder. And the opening of it could be called a meatus or orifice. And the two words we associate with that are external and urethral, because it's the outer urethral opening. So orifice or meatus, your choice. The bladder muscle itself has a lot of bands of thick muscle, so they decided it's not good enough to just call it the bladder muscle. They have to have a fancy name. So they call the muscle of the wall here a detrusor muscle. It's a bladder muscle. By the way, it is smooth muscle. You can't control your bladder. You can control your sphincter, but not your bladder. You can pressurize your cavity, but not squeeze your bladder. Okay. What tubes are these? Yeah, these are the ureters. The ureters. And we're going to see something different here than we've ever seen before, because in those other pictures on reproductive, they almost lied to us the way they drew it. They always made it look like they were going into the top of the bladder. Look here. See that little hole right there? That's where it opens up. Wow. I never had vibrate mode vibrate so loud. I'll turn it off. So these are the openings for the ureters, and this is the opening for the urethra. And why do you think they call it the trigone? Yeah, because it forms a little triangle in the floor of the bladder there. Okay. The other thing right here is the internal sphincter, and out here is the external sphincter for the urethra. So there's two sphincters, internal. Who remembers internal is what kind of muscle? Smooth, just like the digestive one. And so the external is skeletal. Yeah. Oh, and let us not forget, peritoneum goes over the top. And this is interesting. You probably already know your bladder can change size and hold a lot of urine. So it has folds, just like the stomach, which can expand to hold a lot of food. Therefore, they call the folds rugae, just like in the stomach. And that is our markup of the bladder. Did you get the picture? Did I get the picture?
I saw you take it and then
Okay. Boy, we're almost there now. It's cool. I dig this picture, even though it wasn't taken with my little iPhone 5. It's still a great picture. This picture is showing us tell me what it is. That's a glomerulus. That's the glomerulus. And so, watch this. Here is where it filters into. Do you guys see this little thin line right here? That's the Bowman's capsule. The Bowman's capsule. Wow. Is actually simple squamous. It's simple squamous. Wow, that's pretty cool. Most of the tubules aren't, though. Most of the tubules are this. Who can tell me what that is?
Sorry.
No, it's okay. Most of the tubes are cuboidal. See, that's cuboidal, that's cuboidal, that's cuboidal, that's cuboidal, that's cuboidal, that's cuboidal, those are cuboidal. All those others are cuboidal. Now, a really good histologist could tell you which of those tubes were which by their size and by their internal lumen, because they have microvilli and stuff. That ain't me. So I would say potentially maybe some proximal tubule down here leading out. But other than that, eh. So I just wanted you to see, if you cut through a kidney, you're going to see tubules everywhere because there's lots of different nephrons, right? 1.25 million per kidney. And remember, a lot of those nephrons use the same collecting duct, right? Most of the proximal tubules, distal tubules in Lupa Henle are going to be cuboidal like that. That's how they're going to look, okay? Some of the Lupa Henle looks different. There's a thin segment and a thick segment. But anyway, in the Bowman's capsule, that outer layer surrounding the glomerulus is always simple squamous. It's keep in mind, because we make such a big deal, simple squamous in the capillaries, simple squamous in the alveoli. It's thin for exchange. If simple squamous has tight junctions joining it and holding it, even though it's thin, it traps fluid. So your pleura and your peritoneum and Bowman's capsule, they're simple squamous, but they trap fluid. So thin doesn't always mean permeable. Okay. All right, so that's it for this. I just wanted you to see the glomerulus, see the Bowman's capsule, and see how cool it was, because it really is.
Can you see a loop of Henley here?
I can't. Someone could. Yeah, I can't tell which are which. Maybe at one time when I took histology I could, but I haven't done it in 30 years. Then I have to take you to the blue one. Over here to the blue one. Well, I don't have to, I just love to. Because this crazy little picture here. Here, you'll see there's an afferent arteriole going into the glomerulus. And what's this coming out? And what's the name of this right here? Yeah, look. Oh, sometimes they don't have to say Bowman. They can call it the glomerular capsule. Now the space is in here where we've been talking. So actually right here. So I want to introduce the concept that that's actually the parietal layer of Bowman's capsule. Because watch this. Bowman's capsule turns the corner, just like the visceral pleura, and it surrounds each capillary of the glomerulus. But let me have you look at that for a second. Yeah, I'll just do that. That is crazy looking. This here that I'm going to show you right here, that is what the inside of Bowman's capsule looks like. It looks like a creature. It surrounds each capillary, completely surrounds it, and even takes and has finger-like processes that wrap around the whole tube and surround it. And some silly scientist said, those, see where it interlocks there, like this, like your fingers? That's not fingers, those are feet. What? So, you know, scientists are weird. So anyway, they call those little parts foot processes. But here's what, so I'm going to zoom just to like, I'll be right here. Here's what. So podocyte is the name of the visceral layer cell. So, and that's what, yeah, they call them podocytes, and then they say it's a foot process on a podocyte. And the old name used to be pedicel, but you know, changed things. So, yeah, like pedal, podo and pedal. So, here's the cool thing: the glomerulus, its capillaries are special. They're not just normal thin little capillaries. They're thin, but because they need to make 180 liters a day of fluid, they have holes in them. Now, technically, I wouldn't call them holes on a test. They're little pores or windows. And so whatever blood, what's in the blood, comes out really easily because there's holes in it. It's perforated, basically. It's got, now technically they might tell you they're like little windows and they're not complete, but anyway. Point is, those have a special name. That's a great test question. The name of the pores in the glomerulus are fenestrations. So I'm going to mark that up for you. And so if we think about this, stuff comes out of those, but it still, watch this, it still has to squeeze between the little spaces between the feet. So they call those little spaces filtration slits because the glomerulus is where filtration happens. So there's filtration slits there. Now, please don't forget, this whole thing is our super G, right? That's our glomerulus. What I haven't told you yet, but I want you to know, is this. Red blood cells and protein are too big to get out. They stay in the blood. They cannot, they are too big and they can't leave the glomerulus. That means they can't squeeze through the pore. They're too big. So they stay in the blood. But the stuff that's small, like sugar and salt and water, man, it just gets filtered right out. It gets filtered right out and trapped by Bowman's capsule. But this means that in a normal situation, red blood cells and protein should not be in your urine because they're too big. So what if they are there? Yes. You may have kidney damage. You may have a urinary tract infection or inflammation or many other things going on. Because when things get inflamed, they swell. Those pores might be bigger. Sometimes they're going to tear. Typically, when you have a UTI, the bleeding is going to come from some other tube, not here. But if you get kidney damage and really damage those glomeruli, then you'll end up with red blood cells and protein in your urine. And that's a bad. We don't want that. So that's that picture. That's all I really needed you to have there. Notice I did leave it on the screen kind of accidentally, but it's there. This part of Bowman's capsule that we labeled, that's the visceral layer. Right? The parietal layer was thin. This is the visceral layer that they call the podocytes, and they have the foot processes. So the last two pictures I wanted to show you, I'm not going to mark up at all. They're just good. Oh, do you want it? No, no. Oh, it's easy. Yeah, it's
Okay.
easy. Go back right there. Yeah.
I was right.
Oh, that's okay.
Okay, I'm done. Thank you.
Uh-huh. So here it is in reality. There's part of the podocyte, and there's the little foot processes, and there's this stuff squeezing through the filtration slits. I mean, it looks like a creature, doesn't it? And here's this one. Kind of looks like a Brussels sprout or a sea monster, whichever you prefer. I don't know which. It's crazy looking though. Look at that. There. Man, I wish they'd fix the board. That would look a lot better if that wasn't. Oh, I lied. I'm going to show you one more picture. Sorry. If you want that, just to have it, you can take a picture of it. Obviously, it won't be on the test because I'm not having a lab test. But this might help you for lecture. Here, let's think back to when we did an alveolus and a capillary, and we called it the respiratory membrane. We said the alveolus had simple squamous epithelium. The capillary had simple squamous epithelium, and they shared a fused basement membrane. And oxygen and CO2 moved through the epithelium of the alveoli, the epithelium of the capillary, and the shared basement membrane. Well, when you're making urine, you have a glomerulus, and it has holes, pores, and the stuff that leaks out has to get through that. But not only that, these filtration slits are a little offset, so it has to be small enough to get through here, and then small enough to wedge through there. Look at that. And it's ionically charged too, so it can repel things at times. So it's just crazy. It's pretty neat. So this is called your kidney's filtration membrane. It consists of the epithelium of the capillary. Commonly, when it's epithelium of a tube, they'll change the name and say endothelium. Endothelium just means the simple squamous of a capillary or any tube, because it's inside instead of outside. Then they have a basement membrane, and then, oh yeah, there's the little feet, the feet, and there's the filtration slit, and it moves out, and now it's trapped by Bowman's capsule, and now it's glomerular filtrate, and that's 180 liters a day. Okay, so I think that's it. So that's your urinary system.